30-minute recording on it. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to restart where she starts to talk about the Success Maximizer bundle. So I'm going to look over here, and then you're going to start doing that. Are we recording again? Or
yeah, we're recording again. I stopped him.
Okay.
Okay, so that brings me to what we're doing for our birthday sale over here at Flourish and Thrive. We are on July 5th. We are releasing our Success Maximizer bundle, and it is a whole bundle designed to help propel you into moving forward a lot more quickly, working with your mindset. There's journal prompts and a bunch of things. So we're going to walk you through a little bit of one of the exercises, which starts with these events that trigger a story, that triggers an emotion, etc.
Yeah, and let me just break down the process really quickly. So, because we've talked a lot about it, but haven't made it super clear. So what happens, and you can probably think, if you want to think back to a time when you had something that was dramatic that happened in your life. Maybe it was something painful. It was a significant event, sometime between the age of, let's say, 4 and 7. So an event happens. Maybe some kids are mean to us. Maybe they attack us. They do something. So something happens. We then try to create meaning from that. We tell ourselves a story. And very often in those kind of events, we'll be asking ourselves, why? Mm-hmm. Why did that happen to me? Why did that happen? Why? And the mind is like a search engine, like Google. If you ask it a question, it'll provide you with an answer. So it provides one. And think about the fact that maybe you were 4 or 5 at the time, mm-hmm. right? So you said that you were left alone with your brother, and you were how old?
I was 5.
Okay, so
and he was an infant, like maybe a couple months old.
So you're 5, he's an infant, you're left with this tremendous responsibility for keeping him safe. And we know that as human beings, we're essentially wired to look for risks, to look for threats, mm-hmm. to be cynical, all of these things that are designed to keep us safe, but that can also kind of strike mm-hmm. fear into us. So in that moment, you're probably asking, like, what happened? Like, why'd
they leave me?
Why'd they leave? Okay, there's the question. Why'd they mm-hmm. leave me? So your mind is like a supercomputer. What kind of answer did it come up with?
And are we going to be safe? Like, I was nervous that something was going to happen. Like, I was really worried about him.
Yeah.
And I think I was just like anxious, really anxious, and probably afraid.
Okay. So what story or what explanation did you come up with?
Well, I probably asked my question, like, why did they leave us? The explanation was that, I don't know, that they didn't love us, or that there was, like, they were leaving us behind.
Yeah. People who you love or people who love you will leave you.
Yes.
Yeah. So here's the challenging thing. That's an event like that, because you love your little brother, can be traumatic. And what we know about trauma is people have a tendency to repeat trauma over and over again, mm-hmm. and what they're hoping for is a different result. And the really, almost just hurts my heart part is that we recreate the situations of the trauma, and we do everything we can to reassert the story as being true, even though we're hoping for a different result. So in your mm-hmm. case, you mentioned later on, like dating. What'll play out there is you will date somebody who either has a high probability of abandoning you and leaving you after you fall in love with them,
or they're just non-committal,
or and this is the hard part, you will actively do things and not know why to push them away and drive them away until they finally leave, mm-hmm. so that you can then tell yourself, see, mm-hmm. it's true. You're seeking validation.
I didn't do that.
You're seeking you're seeking to validate that story, even though you might hope that a different one is true. So you're like, see, it's true. They leave, mm-hmm. right? And we get to a point where it's almost like we're wearing an invisible label that other people can see, mm-hmm. and certain people are then attracted, right? So I attracted a certain kind of person. you attracted certain kind of people. I think you probably see a pattern in certain patterns amongst the people. And until you change the story, really until you even recognize that you're telling a story, because you think it's a fact.
Yeah.
People love leave you. It's just a fact of life. That's just what happens.
But it's just a story, because that's not a fact.
Right. But you think it's a fact. And we go around treating things like facts. So usually what happens when I'm working with someone and they have that light bulb moment where they realize, oh my gosh, what happened really was just an event. It didn't carry with it any meaning. I'm the one who assigned the meaning to it by asking myself the question, why me? Why this happened to me? Why'd they leave? I'm the one who came up with that story. There's this click and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm actually in charge of creating my results because I've been living into that story. And that story, really what should have happened is your parents left you alone with your brother. That was an event that happened. You take that like a file, put it into a filing cabinet, labeled the past, and close the door.
Yeah. I mean, really, in reality, what they were they had a bunch of little kids. They had 5 little kids at this point, and they needed to drop some stuff off at the neighbors or the Goodwill. And so they're just like, well, it's easier to only take 3 than 5. We'll leave one of the older ones with the young one.
Right.
And we'll be right back. It's going to be fine. And we'll lock the door so no one can get in. And
right. And it was fun.
Yeah.
And they did come back. Right. But that's not the part we focus on.
No.
We focus on the part that they left. Right. We don't say like, oh, wait a minute. They came home. My story's not really true. Like.
Yeah. So let's break this down. So we have an event, something happens, because that's a past event, but these things get triggered in real life. So for me, in a real life event that would trigger that emotion would be like, I'm in a relationship and the person just ghosts me and disappears, and I don't know, and I'm like baffled and I didn't know what happened. So my explanation is that there are no good men and that everyone leaves you, right? So the second piece of this is something happens, there's an event, and then we seek to validate that. See, you know, it happened when I was a kid, this happened, and then I keep finding other evidence of it happening over and over again.
Yep.
So that's like the validation piece. And then what happens after that? That triggers an emotion?
Well, what happens is our stories create emotions. So events are just events. You know, something happens, and the way we know that is 2 people can react radically different to the very same event. And they can have different emotions from that event. So let's say, if we want to do an example, let's say that you and I both go into business at the same time. We're designing jewelry that looks exactly the same. We go out and we get people on our email list. Maybe they're even the exact same people on our email list. We both send out an email broadcast. And what happens is we each get 1 sale and 10 people unsubscribe. How do you feel?
I feel super bummed because I wanted to get 5 sales. And why did all those people unsubscribe?
It's interesting because I'm super excited because it just validated that I have an attractive piece of jewelry that somebody out there actually wants to buy, and my list isn't that big yet. So what this essentially means is if I get it out in front of more people, I'm going to sell a lot more. And the 10 people that are off my list, well, they're probably never going to buy from me anyway. And they were just checking it out. They were just checking it out, and now they're gone.
Sorry, that was a sneeze. About to come out. Let's go with it. Okay, so that triggers an emotion. So we're going to play the role play, maker number 1, maker number 2. And I want to walk you through this whole sequence first before we do the role playing. Is that cool?
Okay, sure.
So we seek to validate, that triggers an emotion or a feeling, or the story does. And then that propels us into either action or inaction.
Yeah.
Or avoidance, I like to say.
Well, an avoidance is essentially an action,
yeah.
Right? Or we might find an alternative action that we're more comfortable with. So event, story, and then over time we validate that story. And then that story creates emotion in us. And the next time there's that trigger, the story's in the background. We don't even know we're telling it. Like it happens blindingly quickly, with blinding speed. Trigger happens, we feel an emotion. Trigger, emotion, trigger, emotion. And if you've ever, kind of flown off the handle or blown up at somebody and then realized like that it was over something really small, like
I never do that.
No. And like somebody leaves
At least I didn't.
somebody leaves a drawer open, right? Or they forget to tell you something in the morning, right? And you go on this big emotional journey that this is what's happening. There's a story in the background, and that story is controlling your emotions.
Yes. And then, let's talk about the action piece.
Okay. So we tend to take actions. Well, let's back it up just a little bit. So decision making is essentially an emotional act that we later justify with logic and reason. Mm-hmm. So someone who wants to buy a certain car, for example, right? Like they'll go buy the car, and then they'll come up with all these logical reasons for why they bought it. And those reasons are what they tell other people. But the reality is we make decisions emotionally. We're emotional beings. And those emotions permeate all of our life. So if you have a situation where you think you need to take an action, and the thought of that action triggers a story, and that story says you're going to get hurt, you're going to be at risk, your survival is going to be threatened, this might crash your business.
Yeah.
All kinds of things happen in the background. No, we don't even know that these stories are running. It's just, hey, you need to do this. You go to do it. You feel this sense of dread or terror or whatever it is, and you end up not doing it. Mm-hmm. And you don't take action, because not taking action, even though you know that not taking it might hurt you, taking that action might be a lot more
scary.
Might hold a lot more fear, right?
Yeah.
A lot more, yeah. So that's how these things essentially control our actions or our inactions. Is in the background, it's weighing: is this action going to put me at risk?
So if you're someone who procrastinates a lot, I want you to really look at this, because there might be some truth into your procrastination techniques, or I know that this happens with I've worked with so many people at this point, like the excuse making that you make about why you're not moving forward or why things aren't happening. Like there's probably something wrapped up in here that you need to clear in order to move forward. So I think at this point, why don't we kind of like do that role-playing exercise that we talked about?
Sure.
Okay. So we're going to use, the event is going to be because the events can be like things that happened in the past, but they're also current situations that oftentimes bring up something from the past. So this event is that two designers, basically same line, same circumstances. They both send out an email, they both get one sale, and they have 10 unsubscribes. So that's the facts of the situation. Yeah. That's all we can measure, right?
Without emotion.
Without emotion. One sale, 10 unsubscribes from sending out one email.
Yep.
So maker number one, I'm maker number one, Jason's gonna be maker number two. I'm super upset because I don't feel like that was good enough. I wanted to get 5 sales, and these people might not like me. Why did they unsubscribe from my email list?
And I don't really understand that reaction at all, because I just sent out one email and I made a sale. And yeah, I mean, there were 10 people that unsubscribed, but those people were probably like just checking out my stuff, and maybe my stuff's not exactly a fit for them, and some other designer would be better for them. But I found one person who definitely likes my stuff and bought my stuff, and that's proof of concept. So I don't know why you're sad. I'm excited to go find more people to send emails to.
So then we go to this explanation process, like, why did that happen? So I'm sitting here having a little pity party for myself and saying to myself, like, geez, like, maybe people don't like what I do. Maybe I'm not a very good designer. Maybe I'm not talented, and maybe, I'm not really good at this marketing thing. So instead of diving into it, I kind of have this feeling like maybe my parents were right. I remember when I was a little kid, my dad used to complain about my Uncle John all the time. And I remember actually Uncle John sometimes crashing on our couch because he didn't have a place to stay, because he was an artist and he wasn't able to support himself with his art. Mm. So my dad I remember hearing my dad in arguments with Uncle John saying, like, you're a loser, you don't, you got to figure this out. Maybe you should get a stable job. And I don't know why, but maybe I need to get a stable job and I'm not really good at this thing. So
this brings up an interesting point. I'll just interject. So there's some research that suggests that up to 60% of the stories that we have are not even stories that we made up ourselves.
Yeah.
They're stories we were told.
Yeah.
right? And story, and our minds, when somebody tells us a story, we almost go into a trance. What essentially happens is your conscious mind has gatekeepers that verify the veracity or the truthfulness of something before they let it through to your subconscious mind. And your subconscious mind runs a lot of what you do and controls a lot of your emotions. But when people start to tell us a story, especially as children, because this oral history and oral stories is how we pass down essentially what you need to do to survive. In fact, there's a movie called I think it's called The Croods. It's a great example of this, of stories getting passed down and how this works. But if your dad was telling his brother that, and you're sitting there listening to that, there's a good chance that just went straight in.
Yeah.
And then this happens, you send out an email, and you're like, oh my gosh.
I suck.
Oh my gosh, it's true.
Yep. Okay, so let's talk about your scenario, maker number 2.
Yeah, so I didn't have an Uncle John. So what I did have was I had an entrepreneurial father, and I had a somewhat risk-averse mother. And together they made a really good team and a really good combination. And my dad would say things like, you know what, son, like the first time you do something, it's always going to be the hardest, but it usually gets easier after that. So I don't know, like I just feel like I just started this email thing. I'm not expected to be like world class at it. Like I'm a total amateur, right? But I know I'll get better, and it's just going to get easier and easier the more I do it. So I'm kind of excited because it's just going to get easier and easier. And he also told me, you know, or I actually watched him sell things. And I watched that process, and I could observe how that happened, and I was like, well, you know what? Like, if he can do it, I can do it. And especially like if I get to watch, you know, as a little kid growing up and just watching him do it. So I think I'm pretty good at sales. And, you know, coupled with that other part about like, you know, the first time being the hardest time, this is just going to get easier and easier. So I don't know about you, but I'm super excited.
Well, that's awesome. So we kind of walked through like an event happening. We created an explanation. We validated the event. Based on like past experience and our confirmation bias. Then we had an emotion or feeling, you're excited, I feel like the world is ending, and what are you gonna do next?
So this is where it gets interesting. Let's say that the next step is to create a full email campaign to send out to your email list that you've been building. How do you feel about doing that?
That sounds terrible. You know what I'd rather do? Sit at the bench and make jewelry all day. Even though I have a bunch of jewelry already made that I'm trying to sell.
So how do you feel when you're sitting at the bench making jewelry?
It feels like a safe place, even though I need the money and I can barely pay my credit card bills because I keep buying materials and I need to keep making the jewelry. But it feels good because I know that I can control that situation, and it feels awkward and scary to try and go out and do this email campaign, especially since I thought I was going to get 5 sales and I only got 1.
So it didn't meet your expectations. And
no.
Yeah, we know how that goes. Like when something doesn't meet our expectations, we're generally not too happy about it. So wow, that's really challenging. So
let's talk about yours though. What are you gonna say?
I mean, I think I may need to find some people to help me make the jewelry, because I'm starting to see how this can work. Like if I sent 1 email and I got 1 sale, what happens if I send 100 emails? Like, what happens what happens if I'm sending 100 emails, but I build my email list up a lot? Like, I'm gonna, like this thing has legs and it's really gonna go, and it's super exciting.
So you're taking action. You're building the marketing campaign, thinking about maybe when you get busy hiring people. My action is to do nothing with the marketing, even though I know I need to do it, and sit behind my bench and work more. So these are 2 different scenarios, and I want to kind of just share with you how this has a compounding effect. And the purpose of that is just to show how an event can propel you into action or inaction. But if you're not getting the result you want, and let's say you're maker number 1 and you kind of are following that pattern, but you're ready to be more like maker number 2 and change the way you're thinking about it, we have an exercise called the rapid reframe exercise. in the Success Maximizer bundle that we're delivering now. I have a link in the show notes that will help you clear that story and identify the root cause of it. Because a lot of times, as Jason said, these are subconscious events. But I want to talk, this kind of comes back to marketing. So Jason was like, he's excited and thinking about possibility. And this is really important. We have a designer in our community. She's gone through every program that we have. Her name is Marcia Newquist. And she started her jewelry business more as a hobby in retirement that she wanted to turn into sort of a side hustle-ish business. She knows that she wants to retire, but she does want some extra income coming in while she's retiring. So she knew after she took our Laying the Foundation program that she was going to need help implementing that and pivoting to online because she made most of her sales at craft shows. So she spent an entire year implementing everything with the help of our coaches in our Momentum program. And within the first year, she was super excited because by the end of the year, and this is someone in retirement, you know, she didn't grow up with computers or knowing how to do any of the technology stuff. We worked really hard with her on her branding and elevating her messaging and all those things. By the end of the year, she had 50 sales, which to some people might not seem like that much, 50 sales on your website. However, the cool part about it is that it has a compounding effect. After she did that in the first year, then in the first 3 months of the next 3 months after that year was over, I think she had another 50 sales. So 1 year to make 50 sales, 3 months to make another 50 sales. So when you start training people to respond the way that you want, it might take some time to kind of build that momentum, but then over time, the momentum starts to build and you start seeing this like...
Yeah, so if you were to project that out, that'd be 50 sales the first year, 50 the next quarter. So multiply that by 4, it should make 200 sales.
Yeah, unless it kept compounding.
Right? So it's a 400% increase. Why? Because you learn lessons along the way and tell yourself better stories. So,
exactly. Anyway, so Jason, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too.
I'll have more details in the show notes. Thanks for watching. Okay, so... Oh, I didn't record this second Zoom, but I don't